The February wind cut through Chicago like broken glass. Daniel Morgan stood on the courthouse steps at 7:45 in the morning, his arms wrapped around his 8-year-old son, trying to shield Noah from the cold. The boy pressed against his chest, small body trembling despite the layers Daniel had piled on him that morning. 2 shirts, a sweater, the puffy winter coat Daniel had found at Goodwill 3 weeks ago. Still not enough. "Daddy, I'm cold," Noah whispered, his breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. "I know, buddy. Just a few more minutes. The library opens at 8, and we can warm up there before school." Daniel checked his watch again. 15 minutes. He could make it 15 minutes. He had survived worse. The coat he wore was thin, a canvas-work jacket that had seen him through 3 Chicago winters. It did enough when he was moving, working, staying busy, but standing still in 20-degree wind, it might as well have been tissue paper. He pulled Noah closer and tried not to think about the hearing scheduled for 10 o'clock. Judge Margaret Shun. Family Court. Custody modification petition filed by Eleanor and Richard Brennan. His former in-laws wanted to take his son. Daniel had received the summons 6 weeks ago, delivered by a process server who caught him coming out of the warehouse where he worked night shifts loading trucks. The papers used words like unstable living conditions and inadequate financial resources in child's best interests. They did not use words like love or sacrifice or father who has never missed a single bedtime story, even when exhausted beyond reason. Eleanor and Richard Brennan lived in a 4-bedroom house in Evanston with a backyard and good schools and college funds. Daniel and Noah lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat in Pilsen with radiators that only worked half the time and neighbors who shouted through the walls at 3 in the morning. The Brennans could offer stability. Daniel could offer himself. Apparently, the court needed to decide which mattered more. "Daddy, look." Noah pointed across the street. A woman stood beside a taxi, her hand raised, trying to flag down another cab that was already occupied. She wore a tailored gray suit, the kind Daniel had once worn in another life, and she was shaking. Not from cold alone, though the wind was vicious. Her whole body trembled with it, violent shudders that made her drop her briefcase. The taxi pulled away. She bent to retrieve the briefcase, and Daniel saw that she wore no coat. Just a suit jacket, thin fabric meant for temperature-controlled offices, not February mornings in Chicago. "She's going to freeze," Noah said quietly. Daniel watched her for another moment. She was trying her phone now, fingers fumbling with the screen. Her lips had gone pale, bloodless. He could see her breath coming in short gasps, the kind of breathing that meant the body was shutting down, conserving heat, preparing to survive. He knew that feeling. He had felt it last winter when the heat went out in their apartment for 4 days and had given Noah every blanket they owned and slept in his coat on the floor. "Stay right here," Daniel told Noah, settling him against the stone railing where the wind was slightly less brutal. "Do not move. I'll be right back." "Where are you going?" "To help someone." Daniel crossed the street in quick strides, dodging a delivery truck. The woman did not notice him approaching. She was still focused on her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "Excuse me," Daniel said. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were dark brown, sharp despite the cold, and there was something in her face that reminded Daniel of his own reflection lately. Exhaustion held at bay by sheer will. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." Her voice was clipped, professional, the voice of someone who did not admit weakness. "Just waiting for a cab." "You're freezing." "I'm managing." Daniel saw her jaw clench, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. Her fingers had gone white at the tips. Frostbite white. He did not think. He just moved. He shrugged out his jacket and held it out to her. "Here, take this." She stared at the jacket like he had offered her a live snake. "I can't." "You can. You need it more than I do." "I don't need." "You're shaking so hard you can barely stand." "Take the jacket." The woman looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Daniel knew what she saw. A man in his mid-30s with tired eyes and 2 days of stubble. Work boots worn at the heels. Jeans with a patch on one knee. A man who looked like he could not afford to give away his only coat. "I'll get it back to you," she said quietly. "Don't worry about it." Daniel draped the jacket over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body heat. He saw relief wash across her face as the warmth hit her. "Thank you," she whispered. My car broke down. I called for a rideshare, but everything's delayed because of the cold. I have an important meeting at 10, and She stopped, shook her head. "I'm sorry. You don't need my life story." "Thank you. It's okay." Daniel stepped back. "Hope your meeting goes well." He turned and walked back across the street to where Noah waited. The boy's eyes were wide with something that looked like pride. "You gave her your coat," Noah said. "She needed it. But now you'll be cold." Daniel picked Noah up, held him close. "I've got you to keep me warm. Come on, buddy. Let's get to the library." They walked 3 blocks through wind that felt like knives. Daniel's arms were covered in goosebumps, his chest tight with cold, but he kept moving. That was the trick. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't think about the hearing in 2 hours. Don't think about the lawyer he could not afford. Don't think about the possibility of losing Noah. Just keep moving. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The library was blessedly warm. Daniel and Noah found seats near the radiator in the children's section, and Daniel pulled out the picture book they had been reading together. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman on the street. He had not even got her name. Across the city, in the back of an Uber that finally arrived, Judge Margaret Chin sat wrapped in a stranger's coat. She could not stop touching the worn canvas, feeling the patches at the elbows, the frayed cuffs. It smelled like laundry detergent and something else. Would smoke, maybe, or just honest work. She thought about the man who had given it to her, the way he had not hesitated, the way he had looked at her with clear eyes that asked for nothing in return, the way he had a child with him, a little boy who watched his father with absolute trust. Margaret had been a family court judge for 12 years. She had seen every kind of parent, the ones who fought for their children because they loved them, the ones who fought because they wanted to win, the ones who gave up too easily, and the ones who held on too long. She had learned to read people quickly. It was survival. Her docket was overwhelming, her decisions life-altering. She could not afford to be wrong. But she had not read the man who gave her his coat. She had not needed to. His actions had spoken clearly enough. The Uber pulled up to the courthouse. Margaret stepped out, still wearing the jacket. She would return it, of course. She had to. But first, she had a full morning of hearings, starting at 10 o'clock with a custody modification case. Brennan versus Morgan. Grandparents seeking full custody of an 8-year-old boy. She had reviewed the file last night. The father was a warehouse worker, single parent, living in substandard housing. The grandparents were affluent, stable, offering private school and orthodontia and summer camps. On paper, the choice seemed obvious. Children needed stability. They needed resources. They needed more than love could provide. Margaret walked up the courthouse steps, her hand on the railing where a man and his son had stood just 30 minutes ago. She did not know it yet. Neither did Daniel Morgan. But in 2 hours and 15 minutes, they would face each other across a courtroom, and everything would change. 3 years earlier, Daniel Morgan had been someone different once. He had worn suits like the one Judge Chun wore this morning. He had carried a briefcase and attended meetings and used words like synergy and optimization without irony. He had been a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm downtown, climbing steadily toward a comfortable future. He had been married to Rebecca Brennan. She was beautiful, ambitious, fierce. They met at a company mixer, married within a year, had Noah 2 years later. For a while, it was everything Daniel thought life should be. Then Rebecca got sick. It started with headaches, then vision problems, then the diagnosis that shattered everything. Glioblastoma. Stage 4. Inoperable. She lived for 11 months after that. 11 months of treatments that did not work, and hope that faded, and a love that deepened even as it broke. Daniel took family leave, then unpaid leave, then quit entirely. He needed to be with her, with Noah, with the family they were losing one day at a time. Rebecca's parents, Eleanor and Richard, wanted her to come home, to their house where they could care for her properly, they said, where she would have nurses and comfort and space. But Rebecca refused. She wanted to be with Daniel and Noah. She wanted to die in her own home, in her own bed, with the two people she loved most in the world. Eleanor never forgave Daniel for that. She blamed him for Rebecca's choice, blamed him for the cramped apartment where Rebecca spent her final days, blamed him for not being enough. When Rebecca died, Daniel was left with a mountain of medical debt, no job, no savings, and a 4-year-old son who asked every morning when Mommy was coming home. He sold everything: the furniture, the car, Rebecca's jewelry, except for her wedding ring, which he kept in a box under his mattress. He found work loading trucks. Night shifts paid more, and Noah could stay with a neighbor who charged $30 a night for childcare. It was not ideal. Nothing was ideal anymore. But it was enough. Barely. The Brennans offered to help. Once. They came to the apartment 3 months after the funeral and sat on folding chairs Daniel had borrowed from the church. They offered to pay for a better apartment, to cover daycare, to set up a college fund for Noah. All Daniel had to do was agree to let Noah spend summers with them, and holidays, and maybe move closer to Evanston so he could attend their church and their schools and slowly, gradually become their son instead of his. Daniel said no, politely at first, then firmly when they pushed, then with barely controlled anger when Richard suggested that Daniel was being selfish, putting his pride before his son's welfare. They left. Daniel thought that was the end of it. But Eleanor Brennan did not let things go. She called once a month, always asking about Noah, always suggesting improvements Daniel should make. Better food, better clothes, better everything. Each call a reminder that she was watching, waiting for him to fail. 6 weeks ago, she stopped calling. The lawsuit arrived instead. Present day, 9:35 a.m. Daniel sat in the courthouse hallway, Noah beside him coloring in a notebook. The boy was humming softly, unaware of what was happening. Daniel had not told him about the hearing. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his grandparents want to take him away? Mr. Morgan? Daniel looked up. A young woman in a wrinkled blazer stood over him, looking exhausted. Sarah Kim, his court-appointed attorney. She had met with him once for 30 minutes, long enough to explain that his chances were not good, that judges favored stability over sentiment, that the Brennans had resources he could never match. "We need to talk before we go in," Sarah said, sitting down. The Brennans' attorney just offered a settlement. Daniel's stomach tightened. What kind of settlement? They'll drop the custody petition if you agree to joint legal custody and a visitation schedule. Noah would live with them during the school year and spend summers and some holidays with you. No, Mr. Morgan. No, he's my son. He stays with me. Sarah's expression was sympathetic but firm. I understand, but you need to know what we're facing. The Brennans have documentation of your living conditions. Photos, testimony from neighbors about the noise, statements about the radiator issues, your work schedule. I'm there every morning and every night. I've never missed a parent-teacher conference. I make him breakfast. I help with homework. I know. Sarah held up a hand. I know you're a good father, but the court looks at measurable factors. Income, housing, stability. And on those factors, you're at a disadvantage. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. So you're saying I should give up? I'm saying you should consider your options carefully. A settlement would guarantee you stay in Noah's life. A trial is risky. When do I have to decide? Now. They want an answer before we go in. Daniel looked at Noah, bent over his coloring book, carefully staying inside the lines. His small hands gripped the crayon with concentration. Rebecca's hands. Rebecca's focus. No settlement, Daniel said quietly. I'm not giving him up. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay, then let's go fight. 9:55 a.m. Judge Margaret Chen entered her chambers through the private door, still wearing the stranger's jacket over her robes. She needed to take it off. She knew that, but something made her hesitate. She had been on the bench since 8:30, hearing 4 cases before this one. An adoption, a child support modification, 2 protective orders, each one a life changed by her signature. This was her least favorite kind of case. Custody battles between family members. No matter what she decided, someone would lose. A child would lose something always. She pulled a file. Brennan versus Morgan. The grandparents' petition was thorough. They had hired an expensive attorney who knew exactly how to build a case. They had a home study showing their four-bedroom house, their stable income, their ability to provide educational opportunities. They had statements from Noah's school noting that he sometimes came in wearing clothes that did not quite fit, that his winter coat was secondhand. The father's response was sparse. No attorney until the court appointed one. No home study because he could not afford one. Just a 2-page affidavit stating that he loved his son and was doing his best. Margaret had read hundreds of these affidavits. Most were formulaic. This one was different. It was handwritten in careful block letters. It described making breakfast together every morning, reading together every night, teaching Noah to tie his shoes and ride a bike and be kind to strangers even when the world was not kind back. One line had stayed with her. I know I cannot give Noah everything, but I can give him everything I have. And maybe that is enough. Margaret closed the file. She thought about her own childhood. Her parents had been immigrants, running a small dry cleaning business on the South Side. They had worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week. The family lived in a tiny apartment above the shop that smelled like chemical solvents and steam. They could not afford tutors or summer camps. They could not afford much of anything. But they had been there, present, loving in the way that showed up in packed lunches and mended clothes and fierce protection. If someone had judged her parents by measurable factors, by income and housing and resources, she would have been taken away, placed somewhere better. But there had been nothing better than her mother's arms. Her father's quiet strength, the knowledge that she was loved beyond reason. Margaret stood and removed the jacket, folding it carefully. She would return it after the hearing. She had to, but first she had a decision to make. And for reasons she could not quite name, the weight of that jacket felt like the weight of every choice that had brought her to this moment. 10:00 a.m., courtroom C. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, Sarah Kim beside him. Across the aisle, Eleanor and Richard Brennan sat with their attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit who kept checking his watch. Noah was in a waiting room with a court social worker. Daniel's last image of him was his son's confused face, asking why he could not come into the courtroom. All rise. Everyone stood. The door opened, and Judge Margaret Shun walked in wearing her robes, her expression composed and professional. She took her seat at the bench, adjusted her glasses, and looked down at the papers before her. Then she looked up at Daniel. Their eyes met across the courtroom. For exactly 3 seconds, neither moved. Recognition flashed across her face. Shock, disbelief, and something else. Something Daniel could not name. The woman he had given his coat to was the judge who would decide his son's fate. Judge Chen's face went carefully blank. She looked down at her papers, then back up at the courtroom. Please be seated, she said, her voice steady. We're here today for the matter of Brennan versus Morgan, case number 23-juvenile-4172. A petition for custody modification. Daniel sat slowly, his mind racing. Did this help him? Hurt him? Did the coat matter at all? Or had it just been a coat? Before we begin, Judge Shun continued, I need to ask both parties a question. Have either of you had any contact with me outside of official court business? The Brennan's attorney answered immediately. No, Your Honor. Sarah Kim looked at Daniel. He shook his head slightly. No, Your Honor, Sarah said. Judge Chin's eyes lingered on Daniel for a moment. He thought he saw something shift in her expression. Then it was gone. Very well, she said. Let's proceed. Daniel gripped the edge of the table and prepared to fight for his son. He did not know that the woman presiding over his case was still thinking about the warmth of his jacket, the way he had given it without hesitation, the way his son had watched him with pride. She did not know that the man sitting before her had spent the last 3 hours shivering in a library, keeping his child warm while preparing to lose everything. But they would both learn, in the hours to come, across testimony and evidence and arguments. They would learn exactly what they had given each other on a frozen Chicago morning. And nothing would ever be the same. The Brennan's attorney stood, his posture radiating confidence. Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I'd like to call Eleanor Brennan to the stand. Eleanor rose with the careful dignity of someone accustomed to being watched. She wore a navy dress with pearls, her silver hair styled in soft waves. She looked like every grandmother in a holiday commercial. Warm, safe, stable. Daniel watched her take the oath, his jaw tight. He knew what was coming. Mrs. Brennan, the attorney began, can you describe your relationship with your grandson, Noah? He's my everything. Eleanor's voice broke slightly, perfectly calibrated emotion. My daughter Rebecca was my only child. When she passed, Noah became the most precious connection I have to her. I see her in his eyes every day. And how often do you see Noah currently? Not as often as I'd like. Mr. Morgan has been resistant to our involvement. We see Noah perhaps once every 2 months, always supervised, always brief. Daniel felt Sarah tense beside him. That was a lie. He had never denied them access. They were the ones who had stopped visiting after he refused their conditions. Can you describe the conditions you observed during your visits to Mr. Morgan's residence? Eleanor paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It's a studio apartment above a laundromat. One room for both of them. The bathroom is down the hall, shared with other tenants. The building is not in a safe neighborhood. I've seen drug deals happening on the corner. The noise is constant. Shouting. Music at all hours. Your Honor, Sarah stood. Objection. The witness is characterizing an entire neighborhood based on. I'll allow it, Judge Chin said quietly. But Mrs. Brennan, please stick to what you've personally observed. Eleanor nodded. The apartment itself is clean. I'll give Mr. Morgan that. But it's so small. Noah sleeps on a mattress on the floor. There's no space for homework, no quiet place to study. The radiators break constantly. Last winter, Noah told me he wore his coat to bed because it was so cold. Daniel's hands clenched under the table. That had happened once. One night when the heat went out. He had fixed it by morning. But Eleanor made it sound like Noah slept in freezing conditions every night. And what can you offer Noah that his current situation cannot provide? Eleanor's face softened. A home. A real home. His own bedroom with space for books and toys. A backyard where he can play safely. Good schools. We've already enrolled him at Oakwood Academy, contingent on this hearing's outcome. Music lessons, sports teams, summer camps. Most importantly, time. Richard and I are retired. We could be there when Noah gets home from school. We can help with homework, drive him to activities, give him the attention and structure a growing boy needs. And do you love your grandson, Mrs. Brennan? With everything I have. Tears spilled over now. I failed my daughter. I couldn't save her, but I can save her son. I can give him the life Rebecca would have wanted for him. Judge Chun watched the testimony with an expression that revealed nothing. But inside, something pulled at her. She had seen this script before. Wealthy grandparents. Struggling parent. The assumption that money equaled love, that resources equaled care. But she also knew that children needed more than love. They needed safety, opportunity, the chance to build futures that poverty could strangle. Sarah Kim's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. Eleanor maintained her composure, her narrative of concern and sacrifice. When she stepped down, the Brennan's attorney looked satisfied. Your Honor, I'd like to call Richard Brennan to the stand. Richard Brennan was a retired executive, trim and distinguished in a charcoal suit. His testimony echoed his wife's. The inadequate living conditions. The erratic work schedule that left Noah with unreliable childcare. The lack of educational support. Mr. Brennan, Sarah asked during cross-examination, have you spent significant time with Noah in the past year? As much as Mr. Morgan would allow. How many hours would you estimate? Richard hesitated. Perhaps 20 or 30 hours total. Over an entire year? Yes. And during those visits, did you observe Noah to be unhappy? Neglected? Afraid? Another pause. No. But, did you observe him to be loved? Objection, the Brennan's attorney said. Relevance. Overruled, Judge Chin said. Answer the question, Mr. Brennan. Richard's jaw tightened. Yes. Dana loves Noah. I don't dispute that. But love isn't enough. Noah deserves more than sleeping on a floor and wearing secondhand clothes. Sarah sat down. The damage was done, but she had planted a seed. Your Honor, the Brennan's attorney said, we'd like to call Dr. Patricia Holcomb, child psychologist, to testify regarding the psychological impact of unstable living conditions on children. The next hour was brutal. Dr. Holcomb spoke in clinical terms about attachment disruption, environmental stressors, and the correlation between poverty and adverse childhood outcomes. She had never met Noah. She had never met Daniel. But her credentials were impeccable, her testimony devastating. Children need consistency. Children need safe environments. Children need resources that facilitate healthy development. Everything she said was true, and everything she said made Daniel sound like a failure. Judge Chun listened, taking notes. She thought about the man on the courthouse steps, the way he had wrapped himself around his son, trying to shield him from wind he could not stop, the way the boy had looked up at him with absolute trust. Statistics did not capture that. Studies did not measure the weight of a father's love. But studies were what courts relied on. Data, evidence, measurable outcomes. At 12:15, Judge Chun called a recess for lunch. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Mr. Morgan, you'll have the opportunity to testify at that time. Daniel stood slowly, his legs shaky. Sarah touched his arm. You need to eat something. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. You need your strength for this afternoon. They walked to a deli 2 blocks away. Daniel ordered a sandwich he could not taste. Sarah tried to prepare him for what was coming, the questions he would face, the traps the Brennan's attorney would set. But Daniel barely heard her. He kept thinking about Judge Chin's face, the moment of recognition, the way she had carefully avoided looking at him directly after that initial shock. Did it matter that he had given her his coat? Or had it just been a transaction that meant nothing beyond that moment? He did not know. He only knew that in 90 minutes, he would have to convince a stranger that he deserved to keep his son. Judge Margaret Chen sat in her chambers, the stranger's jacket folded on her desk. She had sent her clerk to find out who the coat belonged to. The answer had confirmed what she already suspected. Daniel Morgan, the defendant, the father fighting to keep his son. Margaret stared at the jacket. She could have someone return it. Should return it, really. It was improper to have any personal item belonging to a litigant in her chambers during active proceedings. But she did not call for her clerk. She sat there, running her fingers over the worn canvas, thinking about the man who had given it away. She had reviewed his file again during recess. His employment history showed steady work, never fired, never disciplined. His landlord had submitted a statement confirming he always paid rent on time, never caused problems, kept his apartment clean. Noah's school records showed decent grades, good attendance, no behavioral issues. But none of that addressed the core question. Could Daniel Morgan provide what Noah needed? Not just now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The Brennans could pay for college. They could provide connections, opportunities, doors that would never open for a warehouse worker's son. Margaret knew that world. She had fought her way into it from the outside. She knew how much harder everything was when you started with nothing. How many brilliant minds were lost because they could not afford the entry price to success. If she ruled for Daniel, she would be choosing love over opportunity, heart over head. If she ruled for the Brennans, she would be choosing resources over relationship, security over soul. There was no right answer. There never was. Margaret stood and walked to her window. The city spread out before her. Millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to predict. Somewhere out there, a man had given his coat to a freezing stranger and thought nothing of it. What did that say about him? About his judgment? About his capacity to prioritize another person's need over his own comfort? She thought about her own father. How he had worked himself into an early grave so she could go to law school. How he had never complained, never resented the sacrifice, never asked for anything in return except that she become someone who mattered. He had given her everything, not because he had everything to give, but because she was everything to him. Margaret turned away from the window. She could not let personal feelings influence her decision. She had to follow the law, consider the evidence, rule based on facts. But facts could not capture everything. Numbers could not measure the worth of a father's love or the cost of breaking a child's heart. She looked at the jacket one more time. Then she buzzed for her clerk. Please have someone return this to Mr. Morgan. Tell him it was found in the hallway. The clerk looked confused but nodded. Yes, Your Honor. When he left, Margaret sat down and prepared for the afternoon session. She would hear Daniel Morgan's testimony. She would ask the questions the law required. And then she would make a decision that would change at least 3 lives forever. She just hoped she would make the right one. 1:30 p.m. Testimony resumes. Mr. Morgan, please take the stand. Daniel walked forward, his legs steady despite the fear coursing through him. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Then he sat in the chair and faced the courtroom. Sarah Kim stood. Mr. Morgan, can you tell the court about your relationship with your son? Daniel took a breath. Noah is my whole world. He's been my reason for getting up every morning since his mother died. I know I can't give him everything the Brennans can. I know our apartment is small and our neighborhood isn't perfect, but I can give him me. Every morning, every night, every moment he needs me. Can you describe a typical day with Noah? I wake him at 6:30. I make breakfast, usually oatmeal or eggs, whatever we have. I help him get dressed and pack his lunch. I walk him to school, 3 blocks. We talk about whatever's on his mind. He likes to point out dogs and ask me questions about how things work. Why is the sky blue? How do planes fly? I don't always know the answers, but we figure them out together. Daniel's voice steadied as he spoke. This was solid ground. This was truth. I pick him up at 3. We go to the library most days. He does homework while I read books about whatever questions he asked that morning. Then we go home. I make dinner. We eat together. Always together. We talk about his day, his friends, what he learned, what made him laugh. And bedtime. 8 o'clock. I read to him for 30 minutes. Right now we're reading Charlotte's Web for the 3rd time. He loves that book. After reading, we talk about his mom. I tell him stories about her, how she laughed, what she cared about, how much she loved him. Then I stay with him until he falls asleep. Every night, every single night. Sarah paused, letting the words settle. Mr. Morgan, the Brennans have suggested that your financial situation makes it difficult to provide adequate care. How do you respond to that? I work hard. I pay our bills. Noah has never gone hungry. He has clothes, even if they're from thrift stores. He has school supplies. He has birthday parties and Christmas presents. Are we rich? No, but we have what matters. We have each other. What about Noah's future? College? Opportunities? Daniel's expression grew fierce. I'm saving. $25 a week goes into an account for his education. It's not much, but it's something. And I'm working toward my degree online. Management classes at community college. When I finish, I'll qualify for better positions. Better pay. I'm not giving up. I'm building something for both of us. Sarah nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. The Brennan's attorney stood, circling like a shark. Mr. Morgan, you mentioned walking Noah to school. What time do you get home from work? Around 6:30 in the morning. And what time does your shift start? 11 p.m. So you work from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., then immediately walk your son to school? Yes. How much sleep do you get? Daniel hesitated. 3 or 4 hours. Sometimes less. And you think that's sustainable? That you can continue operating on 4 hours of sleep indefinitely? I do what I have to do. Mr. Morgan, let's talk about childcare. While you work, who watches Noah? Mrs. Chun. Not the judge, a different Mrs. Chun, lives in our building. She watches him. How old is Mrs. Chun? 72. And what are her qualifications? She raised 4 children. She's kind. She's reliable. Noah loves her. Is she licensed for childcare? Daniel's jaw tightened. No. So you leave your 8-year-old son with an unlicensed, elderly woman every night while you work. I leave him with someone who cares about him. Someone who makes sure he's safe and fed and has someone to talk to if he wakes up scared. Mr. Morgan, isn't it true that last month Noah came to school with bruises on his arm? Daniel's face went white. That was from the playground. He fell off the monkey bars. The school nurse documented it. There's a report. But you weren't there when it happened, were you? I can't be everywhere, every second. Exactly. The attorney's voice turned sharp. You can't be everywhere. You're exhausted. You're stretched too thin. You're doing your best, but your best isn't enough. Isn't that the truth? No. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. My best is me being there. Every day. Not sending money and gifts. Not providing things. Being present. Being his father. That's what he needs most. Your Honor, the attorney said, I'd like to submit into evidence photographs of the defendant's residence and neighborhood, along with statements from neighbors regarding safety concerns. Judge Chun reviewed the materials. Photos of the small apartment, the shared bathroom, the street corner where dealers operated. All of it painted a picture of struggle, of a man fighting a losing battle against circumstances beyond his control. But the photos did not show Noah's drawings taped to the walls. The bookshelf is made of cinder blocks and boards. The way Daniel had arranged the space to create a sense of home from almost nothing. The attorney continued his attack, methodical and thorough. He questioned Daniel's work schedule, his finances, his ability to help with advanced homework, his lack of family support. Each question was a cut, small but deep, designed to bleed him slowly. Daniel answered every question honestly. He did not make excuses. He did not embellish. He simply told the truth, and the truth was that he was a man doing everything he could with what he had. When the cross-examination finally ended, Daniel was exhausted, but he held his head up as he returned to his seat. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Sarah Kim called one final witness, Mrs. Chun, the elderly neighbor who watched Noah. She shuffled to the stand, her English accented but clear. I know Daniel since he moved in 3 years ago, she said. He is good man, good father. Every morning he make Noah breakfast. Every night he read to Noah. He never yell, never hit, only love. Mrs. Chun, Sarah asked, how does Noah talk about his father? The old woman's face softened. He say, my daddy is the strongest man in the world. He say, my daddy can fix anything. He say, my daddy loves me more than all the stars. Her eyes glistened. That boy knows he is loved. That is not nothing. That is everything. The Brennan's attorney tried to undermine her testimony, suggesting she was too old, too biased, too uninformed to judge proper child care. But Mrs. Chun held firm, her simple observations more powerful than any expert testimony. When she stepped down, Judge Chun called a final recess. I'll issue my ruling at 4 o'clock. Until then, court is in recess. Daniel stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, Sarah beside him. How did I do? He asked. Sarah's expression was careful. You were honest. That matters. But Daniel, you need to prepare yourself. The evidence is... I know. He cut her off gently. I know what the evidence says. A court officer approached with a bundle. Mr. Morgan? This was found in the hallway. Clerk said it's yours. Daniel took the jacket. His jacket, still folded neatly, still carrying the faint scent of expensive perfume from the woman who had worn it. He held it for a long moment, thinking about that morning. The freezing woman, the simple choice to help. He had not known who she was, had not known she would decide his fate hours later. Would he have given her the jacket if he had known? He wanted to believe he would have. But standing there, his son's future hanging in the balance, he was not sure. I need to see Noah, Daniel said. Sarah nodded. He's in the waiting room. Go. Daniel found his son coloring at a small table, a social worker watching nearby. Noah looked up, and his face split into a smile. Daddy. Daniel scooped him up, held him tight. Noah wrapped his arms around his neck and squeezed back. Are we going home soon? Noah asked. Soon, buddy. Soon. Is everything okay? Daniel pulled back to look at his son's face. Rebecca's eyes. Rebecca's spirit. Everything good that remained of the life they had built together. Everything's going to be okay, Daniel said. He had to believe that. Had to believe that love was worth something. That showing up every day mattered. That being present was power, even when the evidence said otherwise. Judge Margaret Chun sat alone in her chambers, the case file open before her. 4 o'clock was approaching. Time to decide. She had all the facts. She knew the law. She understood the precedents. Grandparents with superior resources. Father with inadequate housing. Child's best interests must be paramount. The law favored stability. Courts had ruled this way hundreds of times. When one party could provide significantly better material conditions, that party usually prevailed. But Margaret kept thinking about the coat, about the man who had given it without hesitation, about the way his son had watched him with pride, about Mrs. Chen's words. That boy knows he is loved. That is not nothing. That is everything. She thought about her own father, how he had sacrificed everything, how she had never doubted for 1 second that she was the most important thing in his world. That knowledge had carried her through poverty, through discrimination, through every obstacle she had faced. Not money, not resources, the absolute certainty that she was loved. Could she take that away from Noah? Could she tell him that his father's love was not enough? That material comfort mattered more than the man who showed up every single day. Margaret closed the file. She knew what the law suggested. She knew what precedent demanded. But she also knew something the law could not measure. She knew what it felt like to be seen by someone who expected nothing in return, to be given something precious from someone who could not afford to give it, to receive grace from a stranger. Daniel Morgan had shown her who he was in that moment on the courthouse steps. And character, once revealed, could not be hidden again. She picked up her pen and began to write. 4:00 p.m., the ruling. The courtroom was silent as Judge Chun took her seat. Daniel sat rigid in his chair, Sarah beside him. The Brennans sat across the aisle, Eleanor gripping Richard's hand. Noah was back in the waiting room. Whatever happened next, he would not witness it. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today, Judge Chun began. This is one of the most difficult decisions I've faced in 12 years on the bench. Daniel stopped breathing. The Brennans have demonstrated that they can provide superior material resources, better housing, educational opportunities, financial security. These are not insignificant factors. Children need stability. They need safe environments. They need resources that facilitate healthy development. Eleanor's face filled with cautious hope. However, Judge Chun continued, and the word hung in the air like a held breath. The law also requires me to consider the child's emotional bonds and the quality of the parent-child relationship. I must consider not just what a child needs to survive, but what a child needs to thrive. She looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Morgan, your living situation is not ideal. Your work schedule is challenging. Your financial resources are limited. But I have observed something today that cannot be captured in photographs or financial statements. I have observed a father who shows up every day, without fail, without complaint. A father who has sacrificed everything to remain present in his son's life. Daniel's eyes burned. The Brennans love Noah. I don't doubt that. But love is not simply what we feel. It is what we do. It is the daily act of showing up, of being present, of putting another person's needs before our own comfort. Mr. Morgan has demonstrated that kind of love consistently. The evidence shows he has never missed a parent-teacher conference, never missed a bedtime, never prioritized his own needs over his son's well-being. Judge Chun paused. I'm not ruling against the Brennans because they lack love. I am ruling for Mr. Morgan because he has proven, through his actions, that he is capable of being the father Noah needs. Not perfect, not without struggle, but present, committed, unwavering. Eleanor made a small sound of distress. Therefore, I am denying the petition for custody modification. Noah Morgan will remain in his father's primary custody. However, I am establishing a formal visitation schedule to ensure the Brennans maintain a relationship with their grandson, every other weekend and alternating holidays. This is not a rejection of the Brennans' love. It is an affirmation that Noah's father has earned the right to continue raising his son. The gavel came down. Daniel's head dropped into his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Sarah put her arm around him. Across the aisle, Eleanor Brennan wept into her husband's shoulder. Not tears of joy, tears of loss. But they had not lost Noah. They had simply been reminded that he was not theirs to claim. Judge Chun watched them all. Mr. Morgan, I want to be clear. This ruling comes with expectations. You will maintain stable housing. You will ensure Noah receives adequate medical care and educational support. If circumstances change significantly, this order can be reviewed. Do you understand? Daniel lifted his head, wiping his eyes. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. His voice broke. Thank you. Judge Chun nodded once. Then she rose and left the courtroom, carrying the weight of the decision she had made. A decision that would define 3 lives. A decision influenced by evidence and law and precedent. And maybe, just maybe, by the memory of a coat given freely on a frozen morning. Daniel walked out of the courthouse with Noah's hand in his. The February wind still cut like glass, but he barely felt it. His son was his. The law had said so. Everything else was just details. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Noah asked, looking up with concerned eyes. Daniel knelt down, pulling his son close. "Because I'm happy, buddy. Really, really happy. Are we going home?" "Yeah, we're going home." They took the bus back to Pilsen, Noah chattering about his day with the social worker, unaware of how close he had come to losing everything familiar. Daniel listened, responding when needed, but his mind was elsewhere. The apartment looked different when they entered. Smaller somehow. The walls seemed to press in. The shared bathroom down the hall felt like a failure. Judge Chin's words echoed in his mind. "This ruling comes with expectations. You will maintain stable housing." He had won, but winning meant he now had to prove the judge's faith in him was justified. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Daniel sat at their tiny table and looked at his bank account on his phone. $473. Rent was due in a week. $350. That left $123 for groceries, bus fare, everything else until his next paycheck. There was no room for emergencies. No margin for error. One broken radiator. One missed shift. One unexpected expense. And everything could unravel. Daniel closed his eyes and thought about Eleanor Brennan's face in the courtroom. She had not looked angry. She had looked like someone watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion, knowing she was powerless to stop it. Maybe she was right. Maybe love was not enough. He shook his head, clearing the thought. He had 2 weeks until his next community college class. Management fundamentals. One more semester, and he would have his associate degree. Then he could apply for supervisor positions. Better pay, better hours, a path forward. He just had to hold on until then. 3 days later, Judge Margaret Chun was not supposed to think about cases after she ruled on them. Move forward. Next file. Next life to shape with a signature. But Daniel Morgan stayed with her. She found herself wondering if he had found another coat. If no one knew how close he had come to being taken away. If the Brennans had accepted the visitation schedule or hired another attorney to appeal. She told herself it was professional concern. Making sure her ruling stuck. Making sure she had not made a mistake. But Thursday evening, walking to her car in the courthouse parking garage, she knew it was something else. She had been a judge for 12 years. She had made hundreds of difficult decisions. But she had never before allowed a personal interaction to influence her thinking. The coach should not have mattered. His character should have been judged solely on the evidence presented in court. And yet, Margaret got into her car, but did not start it. She sat in the dim garage, hands on the steering wheel, thinking about the father on the courthouse steps. The way he had wrapped himself around his son. The way he had given away his only protection from a cold. That was not evidence. That was not testimony. That was just a moment. But moments revealed things that evidence could not capture. Character under pressure. Instinct. The automatic response when no one was watching. She started the car and drove home to her brownstone in Lincoln Park. 3 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms. A kitchen she rarely used because she worked too many hours to cook. She had bought it 15 years ago as an investment. It had appreciated nicely, but it had never felt like home. Just a place she slept between verdicts. Margaret poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her kitchen window, looking out at the wealthy neighborhood. Expensive cars. Manicured lawns. Security systems on every house. She had worked so hard to get here, to escape this South Side apartment, to become someone who mattered, someone with power. And yet, standing in her empty kitchen, she wondered what she had actually built. A career, yes. Respect, certainly. But what else? Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister in California. "Mom's birthday next week. Can you come visit?" Margaret typed back. "Trial schedule is heavy. We'll try." She would not try. She would find an excuse. Work always provided an excuse. Her sister knew. They all knew. Margaret had chosen her career over family years ago. She had made that choice consciously, deliberately, believing that success required sacrifice. But what had she sacrificed? And for what? Margaret set down her wine glass and went to her study. She pulled Daniel Morgan's file from her briefcase. She should not have it. She should have left it at the courthouse. But she had wanted to review it one more time, to make sure she had decided correctly. She read through his employment history again. 3 years at the warehouse. Never late. Never absent. Employee of the month twice. His supervisor's statement said, "Daniel is the most reliable person I have ever worked with. He never complains, never makes excuses, just shows up and does the work." Margaret thought about her own career. She had never been just reliable. She had been exceptional, brilliant, the kind of person who went beyond expectations. But she had also been absent from her family, from friendships, from any life that did not serve her ambition. Daniel Morgan had nothing, but he had been present for everything that mattered. She closed the file and sat in the silence of her expensive house, wondering which of them was actually wealthy. 1 week after the hearing, the radiator broke on a Tuesday. Daniel woke to Noah shivering under both their blankets, their breath visible in the frigid air. He checked the radiator. Stone cold. He tried the valve. Nothing. He knocked on the building manager's door. No answer. He called the emergency maintenance number. Voicemail. It was 15 degrees outside. They could not stay in the apartment. Daniel bundled Noah in every piece of clothing he owned, grabbed what money he had, and took the bus to the public library. They spent the day there, Noah doing homework while Daniel filled out job applications on the public computers. At 3 o'clock, they went to a coffee shop where Daniel bought 1 hot chocolate and let Noah nurse it for 2 hours while they sat in the warmth. At 5, the shop closed. They had nowhere to go. Daniel checked his phone. 7 missed calls from a number he did not recognize. He called back. "Mr. Morgan?" A woman's voice. Professional. "This is Janet Pierce from Child Protective Services. We receive a report that your apartment has no heat and you've been homeless for the past 24 hours. We need to do a welfare check." Daniel's blood went cold. "Who reported that?" "I can't disclose the source, but I need to see you and Noah within the next 2 hours, or I'll have to file an emergency petition. The heat broke this morning. I've been trying to get it fixed. We're not homeless. We just can't stay in the apartment until the radiator works. I understand, but I still need to see you. Where are you now?" Daniel gave her the address of the coffee shop. 30 minutes later, a woman in her 40s arrived with a clipboard and a careful expression. She interviewed Noah separately, asking questions about where he slept, what he ate, whether he felt safe. Then she interviewed Daniel. "The building manager is supposed to fix it," Daniel explained. "I've been calling all day. Do you have documentation of those calls?" "They go to voicemail. I can show you the call log." Janet reviewed his phone. "Mr. Morgan, I'm required to file a report. The court will be notified that you're currently without adequate housing. It's 1 day, 1 broken radiator. I understand, but given the recent custody hearing, this will be flagged. The Brennan's attorney will be notified." Daniel felt everything slipping away. "Please, I'm doing everything I can." "I know you are." Janet's voice softened. "But the system doesn't always account for circumstances. I'll note in my report that you're cooperating fully and that Noah appears healthy and cared for. But I can't make this go away." She left. Daniel sat on the coffee shop curb with Noah beside him, watching the sunset turn the Chicago sky orange and purple. "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" Noah asked quietly. Daniel pulled him close. "No, buddy. We're okay. I promise." But he was not sure he believed it anymore. That same evening, Judge Margaret Chun received an email from the family court administrator. Emergency CPS report filed regarding Morgan case. Custody arrangement may need review. Margaret opened the attachment. She read the report twice. Broken radiator. No heat. Father and child spending day in public places seeking warmth. Technically homeless for 24 hours. On paper, it looked damning. Another example of Daniel Morgan's inability to provide stable housing. Another data point supporting the Brennan's original petition. But Margaret knew what the report did not say. That radiators broke. That landlords were slow. That 1 day without heat did not make someone a bad parent. She also knew the law. CPS reports triggered automatic reviews. The Brennan's attorney would file another motion. There would be another hearing. And this time, the evidence would be harder to ignore. Margaret closed her laptop and sat in her home office, the walls lined with law books and framed accomplishments. She had built this life on following procedure, on letting the system work, on trusting that rules and evidence led to justice. But what was justice in Daniel Morgan's case? Was it taking a child from a loving father because his radiator broke? Was it prioritizing wealth over presence? Resources over relationship? She thought about her father again. The dry cleaning shop that barely made rent. The winters when they could not afford to heat the whole apartment and her family had lived in just 2 rooms. The times when her father had chosen to pay her school fees instead of fixing the boiler. If someone had judged her father by material standards, she would have been taken away, placed somewhere better, and she would have lost everything that mattered. Margaret stood and went to her closet. In the back, wrapped in plastic, was her father's old coat, the one he had worn to work every day for 20 years. Worn through at the elbows, patched at the shoulders, but still carrying his scent somehow, still holding the memory of his warmth. She pulled it out and held it close, and for the first time in years, she let herself cry. For the father she had lost, for the girl she had been, for all the Daniel Morgans in the world who gave everything and were told it was not enough. Then she dried her eyes, put the coat away, and made a decision. She could not change the system. She could not rewrite the law. But she could do one thing. She could help. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the courthouse to file paperwork requesting an extension on the CPS review. He needed time to prove the radiator was fixed, that the situation was temporary, that he could provide stable housing. He was waiting in line at the clerk's office when someone touched his arm. He turned. Judge Margaretchen stood beside him, dressed not in robes but in civilian clothes. A simple coat, professional but approachable. "Mr. Morgan," she said quietly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Daniel's mind raced. Was this legal? Was she allowed to contact him outside of court? "Ah, yes, Your Honor. Not here. Let's go somewhere we can talk." She led him to a small park across the street, bare trees and empty benches. They sat down, careful space between them. "I received the CPS report," Judge Chen said. "I know there's going to be another hearing. I'm trying to fix it. The radiator is being repaired today. We'll be back in the apartment tonight. I just need time to—" "Mr. Morgan," she held up a hand. "I'm not here in my official capacity. I can't influence the case. But I wanted to tell you something." Daniel waited, confused. "When I was a child, my father worked 18-hour days running a dry cleaning shop. We lived above the shop in an apartment that had no heat half the time. My clothes smelled like chemicals. My father barely spoke English. If someone had judged him by housing standards or financial resources, I would have been taken away." She looked at Daniel directly. "But my father showed up every single day. He was present. He sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities he never had. And because of that, I became the person I am today." Daniel felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "I cannot tell you how to navigate the system," Judge Chun continued. "I cannot make promises about the outcome of the next hearing. But I can tell you this. You are a good father. What you are doing matters. And the system does not always see what matters most. Then why does the system keep trying to take him away from me?" Daniel's voice broke. "Why is love not enough? Because the system is not designed to measure love. It is designed to measure outcomes. Resources, stability, things that can be quantified." She paused. "But judges are human. We remember things the system cannot capture. Moments, choices, character revealed under pressure." Daniel understood what she was not saying. She remembered the coat. She remembered his choice. And it had mattered. "I should not be having this conversation with you," Judge Chun said, standing. "But I needed you to know. Keep fighting. Keep showing up. That matters more than any CPS report." She walked away, leaving Daniel alone on the bench. He sat there for a long time, watching the traffic, feeling the cold seep through his thin jacket. He thought about giving up, about calling the Brennans and telling them they were right, that Noah deserved better than what he could provide. But then he thought about Noah's face that morning, the way his son had hugged him and said, "It's okay, Daddy. We're together. That's what matters." Noah did not care about the broken radiator or the small apartment or the secondhand clothes. He cared about being loved, about being chosen every single day. And Daniel realized something. Judge Chun had not just told him to keep fighting. She had shown him that someone saw him. Someone understood. Someone believed he was enough. That was not charity. That was recognition. And sometimes, being seen was the thing that gave you strength to keep going. Daniel stood up, squared his shoulders, and went back to the courthouse to file his paperwork. He had a son to fight for, and now he knew he was not fighting alone. 2 weeks later, the second hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. Daniel arrived early with Noah, both of them wearing clean clothes, both of them prepared. The radiator had been fixed. Daniel had documentation from the building manager confirming it. He had statements from Mrs. Chun verifying that Noah had only missed one night in the apartment. He had photographs showing the repaired heating system. But he also knew that the Brennan's attorney would use this incident to build a pattern. One broken radiator today. What about next time? What about when Noah was sick and needed a warm place to recover? What about the accumulation of small failures that define poverty? Judge Chun presided, her face professionally neutral. She listened to both sides present their arguments. The Brennan's attorney painted a picture of instability. Daniel's court-appointed lawyer countered with evidence of quick resolution and responsible parenting. Then Judge Chun spoke. I've reviewed all the evidence. The CPS report, the maintenance records, the statements from both parties. Daniel held his breath. Mr. Morgan, this incident raises concerns. However, I note that you responded appropriately. You ensured your son was safe and warm. You immediately contacted building management and followed up repeatedly. You did not ignore the problem or hope it would resolve itself. You acted. She paused. The concern here is not your parenting. It is your landlord's negligence. Therefore, I am ordering that Mr. Morgan be given 60 days to secure alternative housing with reliable heat. If he cannot do so within that time frame, we will revisit custody arrangements. 60 days. 2 months to find an affordable apartment in Chicago with good heat. Impossible. Daniel's heart sank. He had not lost Noah today, but he had been given an impossible task. And when he failed, he would lose everything. Judge Chin seemed to see his despair. Mr. Morgan, I am also referring you to a housing assistance program operated by the city. They help working families find stable, affordable housing. You will receive information about this program within the week. A lifeline. Small but real. Court is adjourned. That afternoon, Daniel was walking Noah home from school when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Morgan? This is Patricia Wu from Chicago Family Housing Initiative. Judge Chin referred your case to us. I'd like to schedule a time to meet and discuss your options. They met 2 days later. Patricia was a woman in her 50s who had the efficient warmth of someone who had seen every kind of struggle and learned to help without judgment. Judge Chun specifically flagged your case, Patricia said, reviewing Daniel's file. She noted that you're employed, responsible, but need support navigating the housing market. We have partnerships with several landlords who offer below-market rent to working families. Let me see what's available. Over the next 3 weeks, Patricia helped Daniel find an apartment. 2 bedrooms, reliable heat, a neighborhood with a good elementary school. The rent was more than he currently paid, but within reach if he took on extra shifts. How did this happen? Daniel asked Patricia during their final meeting. How did you find this so quickly? Patricia smiled. Judge Chin made some calls. She has connections in the housing world. She personally vouched for you to the landlord. That does not happen often, Mr. Morgan. She believes in you. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Judge Chin had not just ruled in his favor. She had actively helped him. She had used her influence to create opportunities that did not exist before. She had seen him, and she had acted. 6 weeks later, moving day. The new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a well-maintained building in a quiet neighborhood. 2 bedrooms meant Noah could have his own space. Real windows let in actual sunlight. The radiators worked perfectly. Daniel stood in the empty living room, boxes stacked around him, and felt something he had not felt in years. Not just relief, not just gratitude, something bigger. Hope for a future that looked different, better. Mrs. Chun had come to help, bringing food and warm wishes. Noah ran between rooms, his voice echoing with excitement. "Daddy, I have my own room. Can I put my dinosaurs on a shelf? Can we paint the walls?" "Yes, buddy. We could do all of that." There was a knock at the door. Daniel opened it, expecting the movers. Judge Margaret Chin stood in the hallway, holding a wrapped package. Daniel froze. "Your Honor, I didn't expect. I happened to be in the neighborhood," she said, though they both knew that was not true. "I wanted to see how you were settling in. Please, come in." She entered, looking around at the space. "This is nice. Good light. Safe neighborhood. Noah must be thrilled." "He is. We both are. Thank you. For everything. The housing referral. The calls you made. I know you didn't have to do any of that." Judge Chin smiled slightly. "Actually, I did. Because leaving you to navigate the system alone would have been another form of injustice. And I have seen enough injustice for one lifetime." She handed him the package. "This is for you." Daniel unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a coat. Not expensive, not designer, but new, warm, practical. The kind of coat that would last through many Chicago winters. "You gave yours away," Judge Chin said quietly. "I thought you should have another one." Daniel felt his throat close. He remembered that morning. The frozen woman. The choice he had made without thinking. He had not known it would matter. Had not known anyone would remember. "Thank you," he managed. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. You already showed me who you are." She paused. "Mr. Morgan, I have been a judge for 12 years. I have seen thousands of people come through my courtroom. Most are trying their best. Some are not. But very few possess the kind of character you demonstrated on the courthouse steps. I just gave you a coat. No, you gave a stranger your only protection from the cold without asking for anything in return. That is not nothing. That is everything." She looked at him directly. "The world needs more people like you. People who give when they have nothing. People who show up when it is hard. People who love beyond what is comfortable." Daniel felt something break open inside him. For so long, he had felt like a failure, like someone barely holding on, like his best was never enough. But Judge Chun saw something different. She saw strength. She saw character. She saw worth. "I will not forget this," Daniel said softly. "What you have done for us. I will spend the rest of my life trying to pay it forward." Then my investment was wise. She smiled. "Raise your son well. Be present. Continue to choose love over comfort. That is how you pay it forward." She turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Morgan, I broke about 6 ethical guidelines coming here today. I will probably be reported if anyone finds out. But some things are worth the risk." "Why did you risk it?" Judge Chun was quiet for a long moment. "Because 30 years ago, someone gave my father a chance when the system said he did not deserve one. A judge saw past the broken English and the small apartment and recognized that my father's love was worth something. That judge changed my life. And I have spent 3 decades trying to honor that gift by seeing people the way she saw my father." She met Daniel's eyes. "You reminded me why I became a judge. Not to enforce rules. To recognize humanity. Thank you for that." She left. Daniel stood holding the coat, tears streaming down his face. Noah ran into the room. "Daddy, why are you crying again?" Daniel laughed, wiping his eyes. "Because people are good, buddy. Sometimes when you need it most, people are good." 6 months later, Daniel had been promoted to shift supervisor. The pay was better, the hours more stable. He had finished his associate degree and was starting to think about a bachelor's program. Noah thrived in his new school. He had friends. He joined the art club. He still asked about his mother. But the questions carried less pain now. More curiosity. More connection to a past that shaped him but did not define him. The Brennans visited every other weekend as the court had ordered. The visits were awkward at first, tension thick between Daniel and Eleanor. But slowly, grudgingly, they found a rhythm. Eleanor taught Noah to bake. Richard took him to museums. They were learning to be grandparents instead of substitute parents. One Saturday afternoon, Eleanor stayed after Richard and Noah left for the park. She stood in Daniel's kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. Daniel looked up, surprised. "I tried to take Noah from you because I was terrified of losing Rebecca twice. I thought if I could control Noah's life, I could somehow keep her alive. Eleanor's voice shook. But I was wrong. You did not steal my daughter from me. You loved her, and you're loving her son. That is all Rebecca ever wanted. Daniel felt old anger soften. I'm sorry I cannot give her the ending she deserved. You gave her love. That was the ending she chose. Eleanor set down her tea. I see now what Judge Shin saw. You were a good father. Rebecca chose well. They did not hug. They were not there yet. But something shifted. A door opened where a wall had been. 1 year later, Judge Margaret Chun was reviewing case files when her clerk knocked. Your Honor, there is someone here to see you. He does not have an appointment, but he said it is important. Who is it? Daniel Morgan. Margaret's heart skipped. She had not seen him since that day at his new apartment. She had deliberately kept her distance, not wanting to blur ethical lines further than she already had. Send him in. Daniel entered, Noah beside him. Both wore clean clothes, warm coats. Noah had grown taller, his face less round, moving toward the person he would become. Your Honor, Daniel said, I hope this is not inappropriate, but Noah and I wanted to give you something. Noah stepped forward, holding a drawing. It showed 3 people, a man, a boy, and a woman with a judge's gavel. Above them, the words, "Thank you for our family," were written in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Margaret took the drawing, her eyes burning. Noah, this is beautiful. You helped us, Noah said seriously. Daddy told me. You made sure we could stay together. Your father did that. I just removed some barriers. No, Daniel said quietly. You saw me when I felt invisible. You recognized my worth when the world said I had none. You used your power to lift someone up instead of keeping them down. That changed everything. Margaret looked at the drawing again. The simple figures, the crayon colors, the child's perspective that saw gratitude where adults saw complications. You two did not have to come here, she said softly. Yes, we did. Daniel smiled. Because some things need to be said. Thank you. For seeing us. For believing in us. For being the person who gave us a chance. Noah reached out and hugged Judge Chun suddenly, fiercely. She froze for a moment, then wrapped her arms around him, holding this child she had fought to keep with his father. When Noah stepped back, Margaret looked at Daniel. How are you? Really good. Really good. I got promoted again. Assistant operations manager now. Noah made the honor roll. We're saving for a car. Nothing fancy, but our own transportation. We're building something. And the Brennans? They are part of our lives now. It is not perfect, but it is family. Daniel paused. Judge Chun, can I ask you something? That morning on the courthouse steps, did you know who I was? Did you recognize me from the case file? No, I did not look at the file closely until later that day. When you gave me your coat, you were just a stranger. Then why did you rule in my favor? Was it because of the coat? Margaret considered the question carefully. The coat showed me your character, but I ruled in your favor because of the evidence. Because of Mrs. Chen's testimony. Because of your documented presence in Noah's life. Because the law allows judges to consider emotional bonds alongside material resources. The coat did not change the law, but it helped me see past the statistics to the person they described. She smiled. You would have won without the coat, Mr. Morgan. But the coat helped me understand why you should win. Daniel nodded slowly. Then I'm glad I gave it to you. For both of us. They talked for a few more minutes. Then Daniel and Noah left. Margaret sat alone in her chambers, the drawing on her desk. She thought about all the cases she had decided, all the lives she had shaped, all the power she had wielded, and she realized that this, Daniel Morgan and his son walking out of her office whole and together, this was why she had become a judge. Not to enforce rules, to recognize humanity, to use power for good, to see people the way her father had been seen, the way everyone deserved to be seen. She placed the drawing in a frame and put it on her wall beside her law degree and her judicial oath. A reminder that justice was not just about evidence and precedent. It was about seeing, about choosing, about giving chances to people the world had written off. Margaret looked out her window at the city below. Somewhere in that city, Daniel Morgan was walking home with his son. Somewhere, another father was struggling. Another child was caught between love and resources. Another family was waiting for someone to see them. And Margaret thought maybe, just maybe, she could keep seeing them, Keep recognizing worth where others saw failure. Keep being the judge she wished had been there for her father. She picked up the next file. Read the first page and look for the humanity hidden in the data. Because some people carried more than they showed, and someone needed to see them. Always someone needed to see them. 5 years later, epilogue. Daniel stood in the community center watching Noah demonstrate a robotics project to a room full of younger kids. At 13, Noah was confident, articulate, kind. He had his mother's eyes and his father's steadiness. The center was new, funded by a grant Judge Chun had helped secure. It offered after-school programs, job training, and family support services for working families in underserved neighborhoods. Daniel volunteered there 3 nights a week, teaching financial literacy to single parents, sharing what he had learned about navigating the system, offering hope to people who felt invisible. A woman approached him, her daughter clinging to her hand. "Mr. Morgan, I just wanted to thank you. The budgeting class you taught helped me save enough for a security deposit. We are moving into our own apartment next week." Daniel smiled. "That is wonderful. You did the work. I just showed you some tools." "No, you showed me it was possible, that someone like me could build something better." After she left, Daniel stood alone for a moment, thinking about the journey from the courthouse steps to this moment. From desperation to purpose. From invisible to seen. His phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. "Richard and I are taking Noah to the Science Museum tomorrow. Is that still okay?" Daniel typed back. "Perfect. Thank you." 5 years ago, that text would have been impossible. Now it was ordinary. Family being family, imperfect but real. Daniel looked around the community center. At the families gathered there, struggling but hoping, working but dreaming, giving everything they had and praying it was enough. He thought about Judge Chun and the coat and the choice that had changed everything. Not because it solved all his problems, but because someone had seen him. Someone had believed in him. Someone had given him a chance. And now he was doing the same. Seeing people, believing in them, giving chances. That was how grace moved through the world. Not in grand gestures, in small choices, in coats given freely, in rulings made with humanity, in one person seeing another and saying, "You matter. Your struggle matters. Your love is enough." Noah finished his presentation to enthusiastic applause. He caught his father's eye across the room and grinned, proud and confident. Daniel grinned back. His son, still his son, always his son, and that was everything. Final scene, Judge Chin's chambers. Margaret sat in her chambers late one evening, the building empty except for the cleaning crew. She was reviewing case files for tomorrow when she came across a familiar name. Morgan Noah, not a custody case this time. A college scholarship application that had been flagged for judicial reference. She opened it. Noah was applying for a full scholarship to MIT. Robotics engineering. His essay described growing up with a single father who taught him that worth was not measured by wealth, but by showing up. Who demonstrated that love was an action, not a feeling. Who gave everything so his son could have a chance. The essay ended with a line that made Margaret's breath catch. "My father taught me that the most powerful thing you can do is see people when the world makes them invisible. I want to spend my life doing that. Making technology that serves everyone, not just those who can afford it. Because everyone deserves to be seen." Margaret wrote her reference letter carefully. She described Daniel Morgan's character, his perseverance, his dedication. She described a father who had fought the system and won because love was stronger than any obstacle. Then she added one more line. Noah Morgan comes from a family that understands sacrifice, that understands that showing up is harder and more valuable than any resource. He will use this education not to elevate himself, but to lift others. That is the mark of true character. She signed it, sealed it, and set it aside. Then she pulled out her phone and looked at a photo from 5 years ago. Daniel, Noah, and herself, taken at the community center opening. 3 people who had been strangers brought together by choice, by chance, by one small act of kindness on a frozen February morning. Margaret had been a judge for 17 years now. She had made thousands of decisions. But the one she was most proud of was the day she looked past the evidence and saw a man willing to give his coat to a stranger. That choice had given a father his son, had given a boy his future, had given a judge her purpose. Not bad for a coat and a moment of grace. Margaret smiled, turned off her desk lamp, and went home to her brownstone that finally, after all these years, felt less empty. Because she had learned what Daniel Morgan knew. That wealth was not measured in square footage or bank accounts. It was measured in presence, in showing up, in seeing and being seen. And by that measure, she was finally, truly rich. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.